Hello and welcome everyone to Kids for Ransom, the podcast where we expose the flaws, corruption, and systematic failures of the modern family court system.
We're just two everyday dads fighting for our kids and speaking out for parents across the country who are struggling to stay connected to their children.
In every episode, we'll dig into the real world scenarios, court documents, and personal stories that show us how the system is broken and how it's being used to hold our children hostage in legal battles that too often serve money and power, not families or justice.
We'll also break down the laws, policies, and court procedures that are being misused and or misunderstood, and we'll share the hard-earned lessons we've learned along the way.
Just to be clear, nothing we share should be taken as legal advice. We're not lawyers. We're parents, and we're here to inform, educate, bring awareness to the reality that too many families are facing.
If you'd like to follow our journey, hit that thumbs up and subscribe and hit that ping notification bell. Families are being broken in silence. It's time to pull back the curtain on family court and stand with parents and children being held for ransom.
Welcome to Kids for Ransom. I'm Paul. I'm here with Sam. On episode 1 today, we wanted to give a little back history on what led us here to the family courts and our experiences and what they've been so far.
I think that's a great idea. So for me, I've been dragged through the mud basically in the family court since October of 22, fighting for time with my daughter. I emptied my retirement to pay for attorneys, sold every asset I could, thinking that, attorneys were going to solve the problem, the conflict that the other parent was creating in the courts here. And in my experience now, I know attorneys generally don't solve your problems, in my opinion. They just don't have the financial incentive.
Right,
So
right.
I'll go back to 2017 when I met my daughter's mom.
Mm,
For the purpose of this podcast, I'll call her Lucy because I don't want to use her real name.
mm,
Um, so I met her, and she's one of these women that I was naive back then, but she called every one of her exes a narcissist.
mm.
Said they were abusive, um, including the father of her son. She had a son when I met her, and he said that that he had choked her. He was never there for her and her son. He'd be gone for days drinking. Um, and like I said, I was naive. I kind of just believed, took that as fact. Um, so we started seeing each other, and it took until we moved in together that I was kind of around consistently enough that I kind of started noticing some things,
Mm.
specifically with the co-parenting. Um, it seemed like she was the one over time, once I was kind of exposed to this more, that she was the one who was always the source of the conflict as
Mhm,
far in regards to co-parenting with her son.
mhm.
Um, she was always the one who would be interrupting, raising her voice, trying to cut him off and control the communication and what's being said. Um, and you know, she told me in the beginning that her son's dad would not show up for parenting time and things like that. Her son would, obviously be disappointed, and it's going to be heartbreaking for a kid. And I kind of just assumed all that was true. But the longer we were in the relationship, I kind of realized, I started seeing things that weren't lining up with her story.
Mhm.
Um, During the whole course of their relationship, the dad was asking, and which was almost 5 years, the dad was asking for more time consistently, and as always the mom that was putting an end to that and shutting that request down. I know they had been to family court kind of early on when they separated, but during the course of our 5-year relationship, there was no family court case, no active one.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
And another thing I noticed is that her son would come back asking for more time. And
Hmm.
that was generally met with her feeling the need to give her opinion of their son's father to him and repeat all the negative things that she told me about him. And a lot of the time it seemed like she was kind of making him feel guilty for not wanting to, or for even asking for more time. It was almost like she expected her son to either pick mom or dad. Like he wasn't allowed to love both parents or want to, be
Yeah.
with both parents.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was starting to, notice this pattern where it seems like her words just weren't lining up with her actions, and I was kind of starting to notice a pretty strong manipulative pattern
Hmm.
start to emerge. Um, Anything that went wrong in our relationship, suddenly it seemed like it was always my fault, even if it was something that, due to a decision that she completely made on her own, it would still somehow be my fault. Um,
Blame
then
shifting.
in March, what's that?
Blame shifting.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So then in March of 2020, I found out she was pregnant, um,
Mm.
and that was definitely challenging because I kind of at that point had an idea of the type of person that I was in a relationship with.
Right.
And that's can kind of be a tough pill to swallow because I was fully committed to being an active and present father for my daughter. I had seen the data for children that don't grow up with both parents,
Yeah.
and it's pretty clear that they're at a severe disadvantage in life
Yes.
when they don't grow up in a two-parent household. So, I did everything I could to make it work. I kind of took on this I just kept telling myself that, I'm just going to keep trying harder. I'm going to lead by example on what a healthy relationship would be and try to push our family forward. I was working 12-hour shifts, paying all the bills, having to come home and do all the housework,
Hmm.
um, because despite her wanting to be not work and stay at home,
Hmm.
Um, she didn't seem to want to do any of the traditional stay at home parental roles either, like taking care of the house, doing
Yeah.
laundry, dishes, stuff like that. So after working 12 hours, I'd have to come home and try to get a grasp on those things. Um, and as the relationship progressed, clearly that's going to wear on anyone. Working that much, dealing with a toxic partner that's not trying to resolve conflict, that's trying to incite conflict. Um, and I got to a point where I started questioning my own sanity. She'd say that I said or did things that never happened, and she'd do
Right.
this time and time again.
Hmm.
And I got to a point where I felt like I needed to record our conversations.
Or the always phrase, right? It always, you always do this, or you
Yeah.
always.
Oh, yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, so yeah, so that was it was a tough spot to be in.
Mhm.
It just got to the point where I felt like no matter how hard I tried, nothing was going to change. I alone could not change the challenges we were facing in the relationship. And no conversations brought resolution because it seemed like she was just completely unwilling to take any accountability on her side and would constantly just shift the blame to me. Um, and unfortunately, it got to the point where I realized that this relationship was what we were modeling for our daughter was not what I wanted for her to view as a healthy relationship because it wasn't.
Right.
Um, so that was kind of an eye-opening moment when I came to that conclusion and realized that I was better off leaving and having the opportunity to provide a positive example of what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. Um, so I took some time to prepare.
Okay.
I spoke with men, coworkers, people who've been through family courts. I obviously heard that men generally don't get fair treatment. I think that was an understatement for sure, based on my experiences to date.
Hmm.
Um, but I tried to do my due diligence and speak with men who've been through it. I spoke with family to make sure that I was going to have um, childcare taken care of for my parenting time when I had to work. Um, and eventually I filed in October of 22.
Mm.
And so after serving Lucy, um, she was still staying in the house. She didn't have a job or any savings or anything. And, I wanted to be civil. I wasn't going to just kick her out. She's still the daughter,
Mhm.
mother to my daughter.
Yeah.
Um, so she was still staying there for the following weeks. She was kind of going through some personal family things. So clearly I was trying to give her a little bit of time to deal with that.
Mhm.
Um, and those following weeks were a little chaotic. It would go from her being perfectly nice and like everything was fine and there was nothing wrong, almost like we were still together. And then the next moment, it would be her trying everything she could to escalate and start a fight.
Mhm.
At least that's what it looked like. Classic kind of reactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, there were a couple times where, like I said, it really felt like she was just trying to say things and start a fight, and I would respond calmly, how I normally do, and it's almost like that upset her more, and she would keep escalating and keep escalating and keep escalating.
Mhm.
And there were some times when I noticed she was holding her phone in a way that seemed pretty obvious that she was trying to record me. So she
Uh,
was trying to get me to react
yeah.
while recording me to paint me as some angry, abusive, dangerous person.
You think that she was actually trying to, you know, what do you call that? She was trying to actually get some type of evidence against you. Like she might have actually researched into what's going to benefit her in the courts, maybe. Do you think that she would have went
Well,
that
yeah,
direction or?
yeah, I think so because she's already been through these courts.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Oh, yeah. So
in
she
fact, I've made myself very familiar while
she was baiting
actively
you.
uh, dealing with my court case. I've looked through her son's court case now because this is all
Ah,
public records,
right.
and I'll tell you what, it's not completely identical, but man, it's really close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
All the
Okay.
accusations, the patterns of her behavior that are being
Yeah.
acknowledged in court. So there's a lot of consistencies there.
Okay. So then
Um,
recording you, and then what was going on?
and then so on, let's see, about 3.5 weeks, I think, after she was served. I have 2 days off a week. I work 5 days a week. And so the first day that I had off, she took our daughter and she said she was going to therapy and she needed to take her. I don't know why our daughter would need to go to her therapy session. And then she went to her family's house the rest of the day. So I didn't really get to see her on my first day off there. In fact, they went to go visit a family member that was in the hospital, and at like 8 or 8:30 at night, I get a message from her stating that she was going to stay there late to stay with a family member, and asked me to come pick up our daughter so she didn't have to sit there all night. So I went and picked up my daughter, brought her home, gave her a bath, got her, went through her bedtime routine and all that. Um, and then the next day, since I didn't really get to spend my first day off with her, I told her that I wanted to spend the day with her, and I was going to go up and take her up and visit my folks. She hadn't seen her in a couple weeks, I think. And so mom said that she would come with us.
Mhm.
And ever since our relationship had ended, it seemed like mom was kind of blaming my mom for it, which was kind of silly because she had nothing to do with
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
with it. It was Lucy's actions that led to the relationship, having to come to an end, not any other third party that's not in the relationship. Um, so I told her, I just want to take her take her with me and her up to my parents. You don't need to go. And the conversation ended there, so I thought we were on the same page.
Yes.
And so later I go to leave, and she's walking out with me, and I put my daughter in the car seat in the back of my truck, And she says something about, oh, well, why don't we take the SUV? And I said, well, you're not going with us. We already talked about this, you
Right.
know. And so she disappeared into the house as she's getting on her phone, and something in my gut just told me I better go see what's going on here. So I popped my head in the house, and sure enough, she's on the phone with law enforcement. She called 911, basically told them that I'm taking her child.
Mhm.
Um, So I could have just gotten in my truck and left, but I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to deal with anything on the side of the road. I figure I'll just wait for them to show up. We'll get this all situated here.
Oh,
Uh,
you wouldn't have had to worry about anything because you guys never even had any kind of custody orders. You get
yeah,
50 by
and
default.
I'd kind of looked that up, so I kind of knew
Yeah.
the legality of the situation. If there's no custody orders, both parents have a right to take the kids somewhere.
Right, exactly.
So I wasn't doing anything wrong. So that's partially, why I hung out too,
Uh,
and just waited for them to show up. So they show up, and of course, 6'2" guy that looks like me. They want to talk to me first, especially mom's calling saying I'm taking the child and stuff.
yeah.
The first thing they want to do is talk to me. So he takes me over, near his car, and I kind of just told him what was going on. Told him what was going on in our relationship. Told him about me filing. She was still staying there because she didn't have a job or any money, anywhere to go. And I was trying to be civil. And when I kind of explained some of the things that were going on in the relationship, and after explaining all this, he actually encouraged me to file a restraining order because he said that would get her out of the house within 24 hours. And I kind of explained to him, I'm not vindictive towards her. I'm not angry with her. I just, this relationship isn't working,
Yeah.
and I want to be civil. And so I refused to um, kind of go down that path. Um, and then, of course, other officers showed up. They went and talked to her. In hindsight, I think they probably told her the same thing.
Mhm.
Um, so basically, law enforcement ended up leaving. Everything was smoothed over, and I went up to visit my folks. Um, and then, so over like the next week, when I was at work, the the ring cameras, the Wi-Fi was getting turned off because all the ring cameras would all of a sudden stop recording. And
Mhm.
so, but it's funny because they would almost like pause a picture to where I saw a picture of her loading the vehicle with a bunch of stuff. So clearly she was loading a vehicle with
Ooh.
stuff. For some reason, she felt the need to turn the cameras off, which is, that's just concerning because, I mean, why are you doing that if you're not doing anything wrong? There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with her taking her stuff and taking it wherever she was taking, family member's house or whoever.
Yeah.
Um, and then it got to a point where she took our daughter and she wasn't coming home. And there was one night where she showed back up. I didn't know she was coming home. She showed back up at 1:30 in the morning.
Mhm.
And when we moved into this house, we didn't have a key for the screen door.
Oh,
And so, but generally, either we would leave the screen door unlocked when we're not home, or if there's someone home, they'd lock it and just open it when the other person got home.
yes.
And so she got home and basically tried to open the door. I eventually, later saw on the ring camera she tried to open the door and it was locked and just immediately left. She didn't call my phone. She didn't walk 10 or 12 feet over to the master bedroom window where I was sleeping
Yeah.
and try to knock on it and get me up or anything.
Right.
And so then she never came home after that. She was upset, accused me of locking her out. And, it's just my normal routine of locking up the house when I go to sleep. I'd do the same if they were home.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I started reaching out because I hadn't seen my daughter in a couple of days at this point, and I'd never gone a night without seeing her in the 2 years that we were together since she was born.
Mhm.
And so I reached out. She basically didn't want to let me pick her up and take her home. She said I could come see her at her brother's house, but I couldn't take her anywhere. So she was, already trying to control the situation. Um, so I filed an ex parte. I reached out to an attorney that I'd already kind of spoken to try to get information, and she recommended filing ex parte. So, I paid her a deposit. She filed an ex parte. Mom ended up ignoring the ex parte, and they set a hearing for 3 to 4 weeks out.
Mm,
So that's pretty frustrating because I don't want to go that long without seeing my daughter. Um,
right.
then the next day, um, things got a lot worse. The sheriff's department showed up at my house and served a restraining order on me. And I tried to ask them what the restraining order is about, and they're just there to serve it. They're not going to. It's a giant packet of information that they're giving you, and they're not going to go through it all with you.
Right.
Uh, but they basically told me the house was on the restraining order as well, despite the fact that my name was the only name on the deed of the house. All the bills were in my name. All the bills were being paid for by me,
Yeah.
and she hadn't been home in like a week at this point.
Yeah.
And but she still said she was living there, so the house was on the restraining order as well. So I got kicked out of my house for 3.5 weeks until the restraining order hearing
Mhm.
mid-December.
But you learned
And
the lesson about what you would do right after that now, right?
what's that?
You learned the lesson about what you would do after that now, right? Like what
Yeah.
immediately getting a restraining order, getting restrained from your own home. Now the lesson is
Now,
immediately.
well, yeah, and the police officer warned me. She could potentially get one on you, even though it's your house, and have you kicked out. He said it's rare, but it could happen. And sure enough, that's what happened. So
What
the
happened?
guy tried to warn me. I appreciate that he did. I wish I would have taken it a little more serious. So we get to the first hearing in December. I had to go that 3 4 weeks without seeing or hearing from my daughter. That was probably one of the worst parts of my life there for sure. One of the most challenging.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
her second birthday was in there. I couldn't see her, talk to her, tell her happy birthday, anything.
Right.
Um, so we get to the first hearing. Mom had a whole bunch of claims of me locking her out of the house and listing incidences where when we were getting in fights, I would leave and go to another room and express frustration, throw a soda can against the side garage door or something.
Yeah.
And these were all the reasons she listed that she needed a restraining order. And we get to that first hearing, she had no evidence, nothing.
Mhm.
And so they did remove my daughter as a protected party, so that was a big win in hindsight.
Yeah.
And so they gave me 8 hours of parenting time on Sundays, and then they gave me 2 hours on the following day in the evening time, since I hadn't seen her in a month at this point.
Yeah.
And I remember when I went to the police station to pick up my daughter for that 2 hours. It's thankfully my daughter. It's like no time had passed, and she ran up to me and gave me a big hug, and
Mhm.
I don't think she let go of that hug for over 5 minutes. I just walked out to the truck, and I was just standing there, kind of taking it all in.
Yep.
And so we go a few more weeks. We get to beginning of January of 23, follow up DVRO hearing. And once again, no evidence. Said she had witnesses that she wanted to claim to testify to the her mental state after the abuse that she's claiming happened. And but they couldn't come because they're at work. And this time the judge, he probably the best judge that's I've had ruling on our case to date. He started really grilling her on, why don't you have evidence ready here? We're 2 months after you requested a restraining order that basically turned someone's life upside down, and you still have no evidence and no witnesses here. And my attorney at the time, she argued, I think rightfully so, that this was all being done to conflict with and control the custody orders from the custody case that I filed for in
Mhm.
October. And we were 10 days away from final orders for that case.
Mhm.
And so although he did give her a trial and set that for about 4.5 months out, he also gave me 50-50 parenting time until that trial and reordered for FCS mediation to take place again after the results of the trial.
Mhm.
So we get to the trial, and that was awesome having 50-50 parenting time. That's really all I was going for this whole time.
Yeah.
I was not trying to take our child away from her mom or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to protect my rights as a parent. And so we get to April, and it was it was a circus to say the least. We go in there, and all the exhibits they had were not. anything related to the original accusations. And there were very
Changed it all.
there were pieces of information or pieces of conversations that were kind of being used to make things look like what they weren't. Um, so it was all a very manipulative um, tactics by her and her attorney. She had an attorney now, and you know, I didn't think that any of it was resonating with the judge. I really didn't think that she was going to win. And we get to the end of the trial, and he said she met her burden of proof, and gave her a 1-year restraining order for things like me going to the garage and throwing a soda can in another room by myself. Um, while at the same time acknowledging that it was the court's opinion that my actions were not due to, any desire to coerce the controller, but they were just due to the toxic brew of the relationship.
Mhm.
And so, that was really unfortunate, really surprising. They reduced my parenting time down to 2 days. And then shortly after that, I got a private mediator. I'd heard that private mediators can really make a big difference in these high conflict custody cases over
Mhm.
using the public FCS mediators.
Yeah.
But we spent like the next year essentially not really getting a whole lot done with mediation. Mom forced all of the communications from the mediator to go through her attorney, and her attorney would not respond for 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and then it was always the attorney's fault, not mom's fault.
Right. Right.
Seemed kind of intentional, like they were trying to drag it out.
Yeah. That,
Um,
that was the
in
plan.
that time, there was essentially no co-parenting happening. I'd message her about getting a call on her birthday to tell her happy birthday, or getting a video call to tell her Merry Christmas. And, almost every one of those messages went completely unanswered. And I think she just,
Yep.
based on her actions, it seemed like she felt like she just had control.
She wanted to trigger you. That's the attorney guy. They wanted to trigger you to get, a negative response out of you.
Yeah. Well, they never did. Um, Unfortunately, it didn't seem like they need to here. We got to the end of the 1 year restraining order. I actually thought the restraining order was up. We got to May of
Mm.
24. And I get a call from my attorney, about a week and a half when the restraining order was supposed to end there. And he tells me that she filed for an extension
Yeah.
and kind of listed off all the reasons. One of the big reasons was claiming that I wasn't supposed to be the one doing the exchanges at the police station, which
Yeah.
was really, really kind of threw me off because my attorney knew I was doing the exchanges at the police station. Her attorney at the time knew. Um, the multiple judges we were in front of it had come up at the hearing. It's like everyone knew I was doing it, and I mean that's why I thought they were at the police station.
Hmm.
Um, but I think she got a new attorney right before she filed this extension. I think what happened is her attorney found a little loophole in the language that kind of gave her an opening to argue, "Oh, I wasn't supposed to be doing the restraining order, so I was violating the terms of the court order." And so, I asked my attorney that I'd spent, over $30,000 with at this point, um, if there's any validity, any legal argument to what she's claiming that I wasn't supposed to be doing the exchanges. And his response was, "Well, you're going to have to, you got to get caught up under bill. I got to sit down and look through your whole file."
Hmm.
And that really rubbed me the wrong way because when you pay someone that much money and they knew I was doing the exchange and they tell me that I got to pay them more money before they can look through the file to see if that was even correct. I mean, that's kind of lost faith in the guy at that point. Um, so I did a bunch of work and calling around, got a new attorney, gave him 6 grand as a retainer. He took some time to try to get caught up. We go into our first hearing, and the court screwed up, didn't have us on calendar, and so they had to reschedule. We didn't get anything done, so they rescheduled for the following month. And so, 3 weeks into when I hired this new attorney and gave him 6 grand, we hadn't even gotten to a hearing to where we've gotten anything accomplished. And I get my first bill for $7,100.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't have this money. And I already spent a whole lot with the first attorney and never got anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, at that point, it became pretty obvious that this was just not sustainable for me to continue forward with an attorney. Additionally, I didn't feel like I was getting for how much they cost, I didn't feel like I
Yeah.
was getting money's worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Like most
I
of us.
had
Yeah.
kind of just make that hard decision to take this over myself and try to learn how to represent myself. Um, so, we went through a bunch of hearings. We always seem to have different judges. They gave her almost automatically, it seems like they gave her a trial date for 5 months later for a DVRO extension.
A trial
And
date?
what's that?
A trial date?
Yeah, yeah.
Like not even just a 20-minute hearing, but a trial.
No, it didn't seem like anything. We put
Wow.
in a declaration all of my objections to what she's requesting,
Wow.
arguing
You get
everything in the order, saying I was allowed to be there, and the judge at one of the hearings basically just didn't agree with me and gave her a trial date. Um, so we went through and representing myself, we had a couple hearings over the summer. I made sure to put in language or request language that allowed me to do the exchanges. And what they settled on was allowing me to pick up at the police station on Thursdays, but on Saturdays, initially I couldn't because mom said the police station's closed, which police stations don't close, just the lobby closes for the weekend.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard for my daughter because she never wants to leave my house. Like it's a great environment for her. She's happy there, and so anytime it's time to go back, it's kind of emotionally challenging for her. And then
Yeah.
additionally, not having me be able to do the exchange and the handoff made that even more emotionally challenging for her. So in August, I went into a judge and I kind of pleaded with them to allow me to do the exchanges on Saturdays for the sake of my daughter. And the judge agreed to that with the exception that I don't get out of the car and that I had to have a third party there to get out of the car and facilitate the exchange. And, the judge had the audacity to tell me, I just need to talk to my daughter sweetly and comfort her when we're doing these exchanges. Like, that's not already what I've been doing. I mean, the whole reason I was requesting to lift that Saturday restriction was for my daughter, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that alone kind of shows the bias of some of these judges. They see DVRO and they're like, oh, this guy's, I already know what kind of person this
I'm
guy is,
mean.
and so you don't get a fair shake. And so we get to the trial. I prepared the best I could. I'm not an attorney, but I did all the homework I could.
Yeah.
I had some resources that I used and did my best to prepare for trial. And once again, I show up and all the pretrial statement, everything they're bringing up in there, and all the exhibits are none of it is what was on the original claims that they made to request the DVRO extension. And so I objected to that. I objected under due process violations.
Hmm.
And the judge basically shut me down. And, I wanted to make sure I had a court reporter there to document everything. That was something I learned very quickly that
Yeah.
you're not going to get anywhere if you don't pay for your own court reporter to show up, because then there's no documentation of what the court did and they can deny anything they want. And so I wanted to make sure it was on the record that I was objecting to not only the exhibits that were all new under due process violations, but her declaration was not properly served. I brought this up and objected to it, and judge just basically steamrolled me and said we're moving on, and got upset, told me I need to stop talking, started complaining about how late it was in the morning, and she seemed to be pretty prejudiced against me the whole rest of the day.
Yeah.
And you know, I thought I did pretty good considering that was my first trial. They brought up witnesses that were not, no witness list was served ahead of time either. That was another objection. And
Yeah.
they just showed up with it the day of. And, it was basically her fiance and her mom getting up there and making up a bunch of stories.
Hmm.
I had a lot of evidence, videos even, that disproved a lot of it, but it didn't seem to matter with the judge. We got to the end of the day, and she granted a 5-year restraining order extension, and her legal basis was Family Code 6345 that states that no further abuse has to happen, only fear of possible future abuse. Um,
Hmm.
so, that was beyond frustrating for sure. We get to January, and I requested a change and clarification on some orders, and mom's attorney essentially just kind of controlled the narrative and said what she wanted, said a bunch of things that were not true,
Yeah.
and caused the judge to kind of just shut it down. And she was going to make orders based off what the attorney said.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the judge went back and before they put out the order, checked in the previous orders and realized that that was not true. She
Right.
made a legally sound order after doing her due diligence. But what I didn't know is they made a mistake on the DV 130 that they amended and accidentally marked a box for a 52-week batterer intervention program that was not part of the hearing.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
so unfortunately, the next month when I went into another trial to overcome Family Code 3044, which because the restraining order restricts me from having equal parenting time and so forth, the judge basically saw that box checked on the most recent TV 130 and denied me. So that was a real low point, I think, at that time frame here. In my case here, I just felt kind of hopeless. Thankfully, I've found some other resources and started to make some headway here. I got an order for that batter intervention program uh, corrected to
yeah.
acknowledge that that was an improper order. It was never ordered. It's just a clerical error. And I've got lots of pending upcoming motions here that
Hmm.
I'm hoping are going to completely shift where the case is currently at. So I'm not going to go into those because those are all pending.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of where we're at so far. It's definitely a very frustrating system. Doesn't seem like the truth is what is designed to come out, or that the orders are
No.
based on the truth, or it's I used to say it's a broken system, but I think it's operating as designed once you start learning how much money the state makes through the abuse of Title 4D. So we'll see how it progresses going forward. I'm optimistic. It's been a rough road, but I think hopefully it's heading in the right direction now.
I think
Uh,
so, because there's now advocates that are actually stepping up and actually voicing these problems with the courts, well, courts in general, but let alone the family court
yeah,
throughout the country. And um, I think that each of them are doing right. I don't think it should just be one of them as doing the right or wrong. I think all of them doing a combined total of effort is how I think that this is going to get corrected. Let's hope for that.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and was there anything else?
No, no. Let's hear about your story, your backstory, and what's going on with your
Okay.
case.
Yeah, because and you touched on, I think, a lot of what I would say about my ex. I think the behaviors fit in line with what you actually were talking about. So, it's that definitely like it's chaotic when you have somebody who doesn't take responsibility, doesn't, seems to play the victim all the time. So that's definitely the setup for a toxic relationship. And then in my case, this all happens before family law, the family courts happened, to where my ex actually played the victim to some police that were called on New Year's Eve, and to which these police that came over are just listening to her ramble on in a drunken state. Then they decide to arrest me just because of what she had said, and not even try to add the pieces together or nothing like that. So, and this is like my first time going to jail in my life. I never been to jail. I never had anything more than a speeding ticket. So, I thought that this was just absolutely absurd, and I just sat it out, in jail, just thinking that this is going to blow over. Surely it did not. And I was getting charged. Well, they were wanting to charge me with felony charges. So then I ended up hiring an attorney to try to help out with this. But the corruption of the court and then like commingling with the attorney, that just turned out to be like a getting charged with the domestic violence misdemeanor as a result in signing a plea bargain, just to try to help things move along. As I was responsible. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I was the head of household where I was responsible for, three teenage kids as well as also my newfound my newborn daughter. Um, and then it felt like as well a fifth there was my ex. So I don't know. I have enough on my hands, right, to try to just take care of the household, but then to try to go through a trial with, you know, felony charges against me and, just barely making it just with what I was the only one working like you. I was a
Yeah.
breadwinner. So, yeah, so that toxic relationship, it ended, and living together. I ended up actually moving out later on that year as I just couldn't take it, feeling like I was uh, uh, I felt like I was like a prisoner, and I felt like, I had one of those really evil wardens, like Shawshank Redemption, like that kind of warden looking over me. So I moved out, got a new job, got a new place to live. I was very very grateful for this job I got because, man, it was tough finding jobs. The fact that you actually have anything that's like on your record of a domestic violence, there's hardly anybody that wants you to hire you in my line of work. My line of work is IT, so I can't have that kind of stuff on my record.
Yeah.
Uh, but given I got a chance to get out of there and I got this new job and such, I went and took care of my daughter 100% of the time, where I was taking her to daycare every day, picking her up from daycare every day. And then, of course, my ex wasn't gonna, be happy with that, so she intervened and she played the part that, she wanted to, you know, try to work with me, whatever, right? So that kind of went on back and forth actually between me and my ex, till like 2019. And then at this moment is when I finding out she falsely claimed herself and all of the kids on her taxes. Um, and then, we filed jointly after that, to which then led to an IRS investigation requesting payment eventually from me, for her refund that she got. So, and she got a substantial amount of money for her own refund that she wasn't supposed to even file, which resulted in a tax court case that led on for years. And technically, really, it's even still going as of today. And we're talking about 2019, man. So that's been quite a long time. She continues to kind of use my daughter as this pawn, and hold her over my head. That's the tool that these parents are using, the children as. They know that they can get ahead by playing the victim and having the child as that way to get them by.
If they control the child, they control you.
Or they not just me. No, if they control the child, then everybody believes they're the victim, and then they will be giving to somebody who plays like they're helpless. They have no hope. And
Yeah.
and then people give to that. And this isn't just about the family court. It's these type of people that are actually even abusing even having a child. Like, think about all of the government handouts and such that they're getting because of actually having a
Oh
child that
yeah. Oh yeah.
they claim I'm a single parent and I can't afford to da 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 da. The list goes on. And sure, there's some parents that don't pay, but I digress. Hold on. So, yeah. So, she would threaten to call the police and say that I broke my probation. These were tools that she would use, so that I would do exactly what she wanted while we weren't even living together. So at the end of the year, she gave another one of these filing of a restraining order that then she terminated in 2020. And, she had filed two other restraining orders that year as well. And then in the course of this, added my daughter to two of them, where I didn't get to see her for, almost 6 months. Uh,
What were her claims to request these restraining orders?
Silly, man. Silly. One of them was I pulled the backpack that she was. I pulled the backpack from her. No, no, yeah, that I pulled the backpack from her, um, which is for the child, our daughter's backpack. Like
Yeah.
I pulled that backpack and almost made her fall into the heavy ongoing traffic street. I didn't even give her the backpack. She was taking it from me. Anyway, there's like one of those. And then another one,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
claims that I went and banged on all their doors and windows and I was yelling at them, threatening them. And I was like, no, I came to knock on the door and there's nobody answering. I'm supposed to be picking up my daughter. And I go to the window and I just knock on the window there, like, hello, I'm at the door. And they called the police claiming that I was, going ape shit on the windows and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where that was. Um, it was at a point that, so I hadn't seen my daughter for her birthday, and also for my birthday. Um, in the beginning of that entire year of 2020, as when she filed for divorce, as threatening that she would do it if I didn't let her see our daughter during the restraining order that she filed for. It was so funny. So I took care of my daughter for 2 weeks because I'm not going to respond to her, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You follow
Um,
the order.
Right, exactly. So that, she stepped herself on the foot or stabbed herself in the foot on that one, right? Um, and and then we had a hearing scheduled for December, which would be for the actual custody. So there was, and then custody matters were coming in. DC, the child support was coming in. Those type of hearings. So I hired an attorney at that time around September to a guy who claimed he had like 35 years experience. So I thought that was good. And then, I would not get like 100. He tells me that I would not get like 100% custody and that I could shoot for like a week on or a week off. And the restraining order, the one she had, the second one she had filed, that was still kind of even continuing up until we were getting to December. And I mean, I had to go and uh, I had to represent myself for those restraining order hearings. So I started like just looking up everything that I possibly could. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to go pay for some attorney. I found out, they're like 10,000 people are trying to tell me I mean, actual attorney's office trying to tell me it's like 10,000 I got to pay for a restraining order. This is true. I have found that calling multiple attorneys in different time periods, when I said that there was a restraining order, they quoted me 10 grand. But when I talked about just custody matters, we're talking
Yeah.
about $3,000 or what was a 1,500 was actually the lowest retainer I've ever actually been asked to pay. In
That's
regards,
real cheap.
I know, but you get what you pay for too, so we got to watch out.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, you hope.
yeah. So, then I took care of those, but then I was having my attorney take care of the actual custody orders and such. So I had an FCS mediation. For those that don't know, that's the Family Court Services. They have a mediator that works for them that I truly believe are not qualified. We'll get into that in another episode. But in that mediation report, it was actually the recommendation of that court that were to give me sole legal custody and physical custody at 100%, and requesting that the mother should have supervised visits. And it's so funny because all of this was decided on a phone call. Like I spoke over the phone with them for the mediation. And then like the years coming prior or after are then, going into the court to actually talk to, one of the mediators.
Yeah.
But I told the attorney, we should move for 100% custody. Given that the FCS report, it sounded like that. The next day, he calls me, and I told him that the mediation is a little strict on the supervised visits. And I said, maybe don't give supervised visits. But then my attorney went to the judge on our hearing date, and told the judge that the recommendations were too harsh, and we don't think we should follow that. And I had no way of interrupting him to stop him, and the judge was listening to this and gives the order of 53% custody to her and then 40% custody to me.
So
I
from supervised visits for mom to essentially majority custody.
Yeah, and well, let me also, by the way, you know how every single attorney has dropped the ball. Every single attorney I've ever hired, and I am now up to 8 attorneys. Every single one of them has dropped the ball. And in this particular case, this attorney, we were sitting there on the hearing date, and the judge is calling him, and he had already gotten up from his chair, walked somewhere in the office, and was never to be found until later he comes back, and the judge waited the entire day before calling our case again because the attorney never actually said he was back. Ended up going and then giving us a continuance to the next morning. And I'm like, the next morning, that was at 8:30 in the morning. I am not very awake at that time. So to be
Yeah.
sharp on those issues, God, that was tough. So anyway, let's moving forward into 2021. I had tried multiple times as a pro se litigant to try to change the custody orders that were made as they were a mistake. Um, and you know, to a very small percentage here, to my ex that was actually, given over the amount of 50. I couldn't understand this. So, but then, I just kept continuing to get dismissed by the judge, having an emergency hearing, over again. The judge just kept, railroading me in these hearings. One of them, he didn't even take our oath. I mean, I thought that was already like uh, abuse of discretion. I'm sorry, uh, that would be the
Judicial error for sure.
well, judicial error. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you're right. So, anyway, uh, so yeah, then these emergency hearings that also got called for. I tried to try to move our case to another venue, but that just didn't happen because then he ended up using some excuse that um, I think that one was that the that we weren't in agreement. Um, I don't remember what happened with that one. Anyway, so basically the controlling nature and vindictive behavior of my ex, it just continued, and it was continued through the next year. And we were finally able to get our dissolution complete there in July of 2022. And so that's where things all really snowballed into like a time bomb that I did not know was ready to go off. 2 weeks later, after that hearing, my ex filed for a restraining order for my daughter. She was claiming abuse. And once again, this restraining order that she would try to get my daughter on for false allegations. And so that started in August. And then there's this incident at the courthouse a few weeks later when as I showed up um, um, to get some court papers or whatnot. Then this whole failure of these weak-minded deputies in the county of that I live, listening to her story and only her story, and putting me into handcuffs while I was in the courthouse, walking out.
What was her story? What happened?
Well, as far as what she told them, I don't know, right? Because how could I?
Well,
But
what actually happened?
But as I was walking out of the courthouse, I noticed that she was sitting on a bench, which is in the direction that I'm having to leave the courthouse. And I simply walked over in that direction near her, and I just said, "What you're doing is sick." And that's all I said. And then I was like ready to leave. And the police immediately turned around and pushed me back. And then they were yelling, "There he is, there he is." And I was like, "What's this all about?" Here I am. What it's a courthouse. Why shouldn't I be here?
Yeah.
But then they started like doing this whole put your hands behind your back crap. And I'm like, hey, my hands like this. I'm like, what are you doing? What's the point of this? all it was so they can serve me some continuance papers of the hearing we had earlier that day.
So they detained you to serve you continuance papers and or based on whatever story she told them?
Yeah, but that story was never revealed to me as to what that was all about. But they said it was only because of continuance papers, and we're just
Yeah.
trying to keep the peace. I wrote a strong letter to their sergeant about that and an
Yeah.
investigation, but they decided to close that investigation for that was not um, that was not unjust, I guess. Their
Yeah.
behavior was, yeah. Um, but so anyway, yeah. So then we finally had uh, let's see here. I'm just trying to think. Oh, she got the restraining order for my daughter. Then there's that, yeah. So then there's that incident at the police station. I'm sorry, the courthouse, and that's when my ex goes to file for her own restraining order in September, and
Yeah.
claiming all of that stuff that happened in the courthouse like I had done something malicious, and then also claiming that I had done something malicious by text messaging her the day that I was like supposed to go pick up my daughter, but she wasn't there. Yeah, and anyway, so those all those allegations and such. But anyway, for the restraining order, my ex did have an attorney, so kind of that kind of put me in somewhat of a disadvantage, but at the same time, I mean that this was a rather uneducated attorney, that but still had that womanly venom instincts, like they know how to
But,
actually be manipulative.
well, not only that, the judges just seem to favor if one party has an attorney, they seem to just listen. I would have loved to see the statistics on how often, when one party has an attorney, that's the party that wins.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
not even because the facts or the evidence are there. It seems like, in my experience, they just assume that they're telling the truth. They have some kind of moral superiority, or that they're legally correct in their arguments, which, once again, is not always true. They're going to say whatever they have to say to win their case.
right. Yeah, they're all about painting lies, so that's what they do, paint the lies, right? Um, and she had my ex go to the file that or the TRO. So then the case for my daughter was held in downtown, whereas the her case was then held in actually in North County. So therefore, it's like two different places. It's got very confusing very quickly because we got two separate cases, two separate judges, you know. And I
Yeah.
consulted. Actually, I this is sick because I consulted an attorney that witnessed this whole thing at the courthouse. And he told me that I needed to transfer my daughter's case up there to North County. I said, I don't think that's a good idea because the judge has shown prejudice against me from day one in that case up there, since 2021. And, the attorney said, I should just do it. Um, and the interesting thing about that, why I should actually talk about why it's important to talk about this attorney is because I was referred to him by a friend that I had been trying to get in contact with. And I just so happened to run into him at the courthouse by coincidence. Now, it might have seemed like fate or something, but don't trust those feelings or cliche. Like ever get in that situation? No, no. Take it for what that is like, this is not anything like the stars moved and aligned in the right position. No, never go by that. But yeah, he told me that I should go up to the North County. So I said, okay. Then I guess I should just do that then because he said that the judge is more familiar. Now, I requested to the downtown judge that I transfer the family court to North County. So this was kind of a major mistake, because I don't like that judge, and I know he didn't like me. Um, so we had our hearing two times there in October for the restraining order, one also in November. and then the emergency hearing that I had in December. And so that was just to enforce the supervised visits that I was granted in November. And the fact that my ex was not cooperating with the order, and it didn't seem to give mine to the judge so much. So that, I mean, that was a tactic by the attorney. They knew they could just, you know what? He might be ordered that, but we'll just draw this little page out, and the judge ain't gonna do nothing to me because I'm a judge, an attorney, and the worst I get is don't do that again. So, I had 3 supervised visits before the visitation monitors terminated my visits for taking my daughter to my home on Christmas Eve. There was no policy, no court order, or no rules of court ever that expressed that it was violating my visit by doing this. No limitations whatsoever on where I could take my daughter. Nowhere. So it came January, and for the last hearing, that was the last hearing, which then again, the judge abused his discretion and my rights by allowing these witnesses for my ex, you know, to come and testify, to which I was never even given a notice, and that's 3 witnesses to be exact. And the judge never even let me state my argument or present my evidence, didn't even let me call witnesses. So I had asked for a continuance, and he denied it. And the judge ruled on a 5-year restraining order without any supervised visits. The only visits that would take place is via conjoint therapy until, the court changes the order. So all of these hearings that I had gone to, I had an attorney on one of them, which was for the November hearing. And once again, I'm put in a position where you get an attorney, they drop the ball, and they do something, I would say it's reparable harm to your case. And then you're scared because you're like, well, one, you don't have a whole lot of time to be shopping around for one. You don't trust them anymore because of what they've done to you. And now
Yeah.
you're like, damn, and I gotta put up another retainer because they took my retainer and they're not
Yeah.
gonna get it back anytime soon. So, you're really stressed out and in a real big pickle on trying to get something resolved there. So that's yeah, so then that attorney was trying to charge me over $11,000 for like 10 days that they even started on the case. He didn't even go and get the FOA, the findings after order, so that I could present that to the visitation monitor, so that they would start my visits as well. Um, so there was that whole little mess there, right? But then whatever, everything ends the way it is. I hired all of these court reporters because I didn't have a fee waiver, and
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't gonna qualify for one. So I hired all these court reporters, which was absurd. It was nuts. We're talking $550, excuse me, for a half day, and then $1,000, I'm sorry, $1,100 for the full day of a hearing. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that was expensive itself. Just think of all those hearings. The last day that I had that court reporter, I did not get the second half of that hearing transcribed. So that was the nail in my coffin, because
Yeah.
then you know, I was gonna want to do something in regards to an appeal. But anyway, as you expect after getting that order, I was absolutely devastated. I was shut down.
Sure.
I I really did not want to go do anything, for weeks. And luckily enough, though, I got enough motivation to go file that appeal by the deadline. Um, and that was exhausting. It took over a year and a half to get a decision. To which then by eventually then was denied. And during the year, I had that ex parte after ex parte, hearing after hearing, just trying to get the judge to enforce the conjoint therapy that I was supposed to go to, as my ex was refusing to go. I tried to change venues, and I was denied that. And that one was because my ex didn't show up for that hearing. And then I actually filed I did file notice to her, but the judge, he didn't seem to like the way that I did it, and said that I did an improper service because I had emailed it to her, when in fact our previous judge had already gave us the order that we could actually communicate through email and sending each other those that paperwork. We've always been doing that, and now this prick all of a sudden decides that he just wants to change it that very moment.
I don't think the judge actually has a say in whether that's allowed. It's the other party whether they agree to it.
Thank you.
If I'm not
That's actually
mistaken.
good. That's a good point too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another example of prejudice by this fat prick that I had to deal with. Anyway, he'll get me off on tangents about that guy, man. Let me tell you. Um, yeah. So the change of venue thing didn't work. You know, and then at the end of the year, I hired an attorney who would try to go to play along with their game in court, and I was granted by the judge, to come back for an ex parte if we got a letter from the conjoint therapist that's providing an update, and that
Mhm.
and that, once again that piece of crap attorney, you know, um, she would not go. She refused to go to the hearing as an ex parte and wanted to file as a normal hearing, which takes, as you know, 5 months. So, you know, this is where I was like, I'm firing you. I fired her. I was like, I'm done with this. She's extorting money out of me, basically. I even told her that. I made sure I made it. I told her on the phone, you're an extortionist. And the only reason why you even want to go on, you don't want to go to this hearing is because you want to extort more money out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. She actually got pissed about that. I was like, what's up? Anyway, so after I fired her, then I, filed an ex parte, claiming the abuse. I'm sorry, it was actually I got it was my ex filed an ex parte claiming that I abused my daughter at the conjoined therapist's office, and that's why I hired this other attorney to go into there. One is actually defending me on that whole bullshit, and then uh, also to ask for an evidentiary hearing, to show the parental alienation and such that she was doing. So then we were able to actually prove to the judge that was bullshit, and then in fact my attorney did get a evidentiary scheduled, which was going to be 6 months down the road, but he got one. Um, and then this attorney was negligent in the hearings in ways, some ways that I just decided to fire him. And prepared everything myself for the evidentiary. So I subpoenaed the therapist. I filed all that myself, and then I went to the hearing in June to present everything. And the therapist refused to testify to the sessions that we had, claiming that HIPAA laws, violate, or is violating HIPAA laws, by discussing these sessions. So the judge postponed this hearing another month due to the appeal that I had filed, which that didn't come out until July. And so then that was also denied, or affirmed. And the reason they gave me was because I didn't have a transcript of my ex's testimony on that last day, the last 2 hours of that hearing on the
Yeah.
transcript. So then the judge gave orders for unsupervised visits and holiday visits for, like, 4 per year. That's about it. They're 8 hours, but still 4 per year. And then like 10 hours a week for parenting time. Then the judge ordered I, continue this conjoint therapy until I'm released by the therapist, which is absurd. There was never even a reason for even going to conjoint therapists. There was never any legal basis for going to conjoint therapists.
Yeah.
Requesting, they requested that then I just go on my own therapy, and of course the mother had to do her own therapy. So I've been filing for another hearing, since, and to try to get evidentiary hearings, but continue to just keep getting denied by the judge on moronic excuses. My daughter will be suffering the trauma for these last 3 years due to these stress ticks that she's been getting. Um, they've kind of they've kind of like mutated since I first knew about them back in 2023, where it was just like first it was like shoulder shrugging, then the next
Yeah.
thing was her mouth twitching, and then next thing you know she would be like kind of doing that thing. And I'm like, what are you doing to our daughter? And she goes to the hospital and doctors very frequently. That's frustrating and scary, and I
Yeah.
have a lot of the times I have no idea where she's at. Her mom takes her to Mexico quite often, so that's very scary because of the fact of she's down in Tijuana. I'm sorry, that's that it can be very dangerous in areas, and
Sure. Sure.
I challenge anybody to deny that. Um, anyway, she's had no education at one point, until this year is when she started going to public school, which was in January.
Yeah.
And but since July of 2024 is when I used every date of parenting time to apply lessons through these workbooks that I bought, for my daughter to just to be able to learn English, math, critical thinking, um, anything. Well, maybe I didn't get it so much into science, but I do have a science kit, a chemistry kit that we've played with since she was even 2. Uh,
Sure.
yeah, but her mother has never ever got her any of this up until this year is when she finally, because I showed all of this evidence in court in January, and now all of a sudden she's doing it, and what's the judge gonna think? The judge is gonna look at her like, "Oh, you're such a good parent," but she's not even really doing it with her.
Yeah.
But you just keep on struggling, with these types of situations, and so hopefully now, getting some good, powerful tools behind our backs, we can actually get in there and start actually getting the kind of data for a judge to, you can't deny it. You can't deny science, you can't deny truth.
Yeah.
Truth is shown.
Well, I think you got to provide so much data that it's hard for them to ignore because
There we go.
they abuse their discretion for sure. They have a lot of discretion, um, and it seems like sometimes that it's almost like they could feel like they could rule however they want.
Yeah.
Um, but I think at this point, I feel like if you put enough in front of them and you keep putting this on the record and on the record, at some point someone's going to have to answer. Um,
Yeah.
you shouldn't have to provide. I mean, you shouldn't have to do that just to exercise your natural rights as a parent. But unfortunately, that's the system we have currently.
And it scares me to think, that, and I've told you this before, I think, in our conversations. I really don't trust the appellate court. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, I don't trust nothing about the appellate court, any court in California, as far as it goes. We've
yeah,
seen, even in Washington now, we're like, wow, they got federal judges that are being sued because their whole system is just completely corrupted.
well, I like to hear about judges getting sued because the problem is we've talked about this is it seems like there's just no accountability for them. They can do whatever they want. There's no
Right,
recourse to their actions.
right. And we'll get into that in some episodes, which will be actually wonderful.
Sure,
Um, But I think we've taken enough of your time today, so we'll end this on a positive note. We'll be bringing you back more a next episode of the the experiences, but as well as talking shop. We'll be doing some of that for you next time.
absolutely, absolutely. We got a lot of topics, an overwhelming amount of topics. I think we want to cover. So I
Yeah.
think we're going to have plenty to cover for quite a few episodes to come. So I'm excited about it.
All right. Well, take care, everyone.
Yep. Thanks for sharing your story. We'll see you next week.
You too. Thanks, Sam.
Bye.